Hey folks, what's up? Today is Thursday, and this is, of course, the Roland Martin Unfiltered live stream as well as podcast. Glad to be with you on this day. I've got a fantastic show for you today, and we're talking Lorraine Hansberry on tomorrow, Friday. PBS is going to debut across the country the film. It is called American Masters Lorraine Hansberry, Sighted Eyes, Feeling Heart. Now you have to check your local PBS affiliate for the actual airing of that, because it depends on the city that you're in. But it's going to tell you about the life and legacy of this brilliant playwright, this sister, who died at the age of 34 from cancer. Now, of course, it was January 12th that marked the anniversary of her death. And a lot of folks really don't know much about her. And so here's the trailer from the upcoming PBS documentary about Lorraine Hansberry.
Serious drama that has at least the objective of making a larger statement about life, I think sooner or later has to become involved in its time.
Lorraine Hansberry is hugely important for having written A Raisin in the Sun, the most celebrated play by an African-American author, considered one of the great plays of the 20th century.
I'm looking in the mirror this morning and I'm thinking I'm 35 years old, I'm married 11 years, and I got a boy who's got to sleep in the living room because I got nothing, hey? Nothing to give him but stories.
She was reaching into the essence of who we were, who we are, where we came from.
It isn't as if we got up today and said, you know, what can we do to irritate America?
Lorraine was a very political person. Her plays, that to me is her jumping off place.
She's fighting the oppression of women. She's fighting against race discrimination, poverty, class.
Lorraine wasn't just a conventional mainstream liberal. Lorraine was a left-wing radical.
It really doesn't matter whether you're talking about the oppressed or the oppressor. An oppressive society will dehumanize and degenerate everyone involved.
Among all the women I knew, she was the most exciting.
As a middle-class Black woman, Hansberry was supposed to live a conventional life. And certainly in her early years in New York, she was not living a conventional life.
She's living this kind of parallel life and writing about it.
Lorraine became like part of my consciousness. She seemed to know something about everything. She was a profound thinker.
Lorraine was this new moment on the horizon. She set a whole new paradigm, a whole new stage for what we could now begin to expect of America and what we could begin to expect of ourselves.
Wow, that is going to be a powerful, powerful documentary. So I had a great conversation via Skype earlier today with Tracy Heather Strain. She is the filmmaker who has worked on this for more than a decade. I think you're certainly going to enjoy our conversation. So here's my chat with Tracy. So first off, Tracy, what was so interesting and unique about Lorraine Hansberry that you said, you know what, this story needed to be told in this way?
I was just struck by the fact that no one really knew about Lorraine Hansberry, and I didn't know obviously now I know a lot more about Lorraine Hansberry than I did when I first said, oh, there should be a documentary about Lorraine Hansberry, which I did before I was even a filmmaker. During the 80s, after I had graduated from college, I had seen a lot of movies. There was a big independent film movement in the 80s, and Spike Lee came out, and he had that call, Make Black Film. And I was really drawn to the fact that there are not a lot of stories about African Americans who are like me out there in the world, and Lorraine Hansberry came into my head. The reason she was in my head in the first place is when I was 17 years old, my grandmother took me and my little sister to see the play To Be Young, Gifted, and Black. And I encountered Hansberry's words for the first time. And like almost anyone who encounters Hansberry's words, no matter if you're black or white or Asian or whatever, whoever you are or however you identify, they're really powerful and they're often life-changing. And I think if you're African American and a woman, they are particularly important and powerful. So I figured out how to get into filmmaking. I became a filmmaker, gradually moved up, and really was struck by the fact that people only knew A Raisin in the Sun. And some people are kind of dismissive of Hansberry because of A Raisin in the Sun.
And actually that's what jumped out at me, because is that if you talk to people and you say Lorraine Hansberry, that's the only thing they know. That's it.
It is the only thing they know, and if they know it, it's not always a positive. I think there was a way that maybe because she died early, and then there was this wave of people that were identified as Black Arts Movement, and many of those people weren't aware of how radical she was. Her play is subtle in many ways in terms of its activism, and she was kind of relegated to this sort of integrationist, if people want to divide African Americans of that time period into the King camp and the Malcolm X camp, she was kind of in the King camp, but they didn't realize that she was very outspoken and held very radical ideas. And it's in part because of this play.
And also, I think her dying at 34. So it's not like she had this long runway. So an opportunity to sort of build a name over a period of time.
Yeah, that's totally right. And she was really interested in a lot of things. Before she died, she was working on a variety of plays, and they weren't all about the African American experience. She wanted to tell a story about a Native American boy. She was going to adapt a Charles Chestnut novel into a play. She was writing she did write about people that she knew in Greenwich Village, and that was her last Broadway play, The Sign in Sidney Brewstein's Window. But she really felt that she wanted to connect with people. There's an interview she did with someone named Patricia Marks, and she said, "I believe that the highest gift of man is art, and I'm audacious enough to think of myself as an artist." And she goes on to say that she basically wants to connect with people and see if they can share illuminations about each other. And ultimately, based on all the work I've done on Hansberry, she wanted to change the world. She wanted to make our country live up to its ideals.
I asked this question of all of the book authors I talked to. So I'll ask you the same question. When you were doing your research, when you were working on this, what one thing represented the wow moment that caused you to go, wow?
I have to say, this is a really hard question for me because I've worked on this for so long. We count 14 years. So we count the start of this project as 2004 when I joined this with someone named Chiz Schultz, and Chiz was one of the original producers of the off-Broadway production of To Be Young, Gifted, and Black, but he also was the individual who Robert Nemiroff had granted access for a documentary to use Lorraine Hansberry's papers, and he'd been looking for someone to direct. And in 2004, I was actually looking for this person that I didn't know was named Chiz Schultz because I wanted to do this documentary about Lorraine Hansberry. So we joined forces. So that's 14 years, and it's kind of hard to remember the wow moments because and sometimes I've just lately been thinking of all the frustrating moments. But I think that we were always struck as to how organically she was connected to the major movements of her lifetime. She knew like everybody, and she didn't know them. It's so interesting to read in her diaries that she felt like, well, I'll write this person a letter, and people often, wrote back, especially after A Raisin in the Sun. And so I was really struck by her connectedness, and so I guess that's the one.
And when you say connectedness, in terms of obviously being in a family that was extremely involved in your various organizations, NAACP, National Urban League, but also, and I guess it's hard for many of us to understand this. I guess for me, when I talk to Harry Belafonte, and when he's talking about Paul Robeson, and when he's talking about Dubois, and he's talking about, you know, these amazing folks. I mean, these are also people who were in her life at an early age, and so, I mean, it's sort of wild to think that, oh yeah, you know, Paul Robeson came by the house, and B.B. Du Bois came by the house, and so clearly, being among these unbelievable powerhouses had an effect on her.
Yes, when Lorraine Hansberry lived in a very empowered household, and she had the benefit of seeing very famous people come into her home, and discuss ideas. And you have to put it in this context. First of all, we have segregation, so people can't stay in any old hotel. Right. And so a lot of times people would stay in other people's homes. And Chanel Perry, her cousin, talks about the fact that they would sit on the floor and listen. They were allowed to listen. She said the women didn't talk, sadly to hear, but as you know, they were little kids listening to these serious-minded adults talking about how to fix things for the African American community. And so this is a part of her. And then she's a daddy's girl, so she really was inspired by the things that he was doing. He was a successful real estate developer and was trying to continue to change, the society. And then her uncle, William Leo Hansberry, was a famed African scholar. He wasn't, I would say that he was a pioneering African scholar because he faced a lot of opposition for his research into Africa, even from African Americans, for a long time. But people that became leaders in the independence movement, like Nnamdi Azikiwe, came to the Hansberry home. So she was hearing from these people and hearing their stories and issues early on. So she goes to New York, and she's encountering Paul Robeson. She's working for the newspaper he created. Du Bois is around the corner. Alice Childress, who'd been on Broadway in the play Anna Lucasta, is working there. People who really believed that an artist had more responsibility than just to their art. They had a responsibility to society. They needed to use their art to try to change things.
For you, and when you talk about the length of time working on this, for a lot of people, they would go, Jesus, that's literally birthing a child and they're about to graduate from college or from high school.
Yeah, it was a long time. It took a long time because it was hard for us to raise the money. It's not always obvious to people who have money, that large sums of money to share, that our stories are important and valuable. It's one thing. It's almost like sometimes people can't hear you. If I say this is a really important story, that doesn't provide maybe enough validation that it should be, told. Because my husband and I have a track record of creating documentaries for public television. We have done 2-hour films, that are archival based, that did well for public television. Joe Schultz has done a lot of work for public television, and so, it was hard. That was what took so long. And so what we did, because we were so nervous about losing people, is as soon as we got a little bit of money, we would run out and do a set of interviews. So we started interviewing people in 2006, and then we'd come back, maybe get some more, do some research, go to some research trips. And then we made a sample reel, and we tried to use that to continue to raise money.
And so let's talk about that, because I think for a lot of people, they hear about films and they hear, oh, the studio did this and did that, and that was funded. But, like when Nate Parker did The Birth of a Nation, I mean, he went out and raised the $8 million. I mean, that was, having to go door to door, talking to people, and selling it. And so it's the same way for this. It's not, I guess people don't understand. It's not like PBS goes, oh yeah, here you go. Here's $2 million. There you go. Knock it out.
No, yeah, they do not do that. And what we had to do was we had to knock on doors. We did a Kickstarter campaign. I applied for a lot of grants. And the thing about applying for a grant, you write a grant, they ask for what the schedule is going to be. And if you don't get the grant, your kind of life is upended. You have to figure out, okay, the time that you carved out that you were hoping to work on Hansberry, now you have to fill it with something that's going to pay you a living. So, it's just a process that is very challenging. And so in some ways I wasn't really prepared. I thought it was going to be an easy sell. She wrote one of the most read plays in North America. It's taught in almost every school in the country.
Right.
I thought people would be, of course, this is a no-brainer, but it really wasn't the case. The other thing that most people aren't aware of is you have to pay for the materials. Most of the materials you see in a documentary, you have to pay for the people to work on them. And sometimes people say, "Oh, get interns." Well, the kind of visualization that you saw in this film, that's not intern work. You need people who have done this work before.
Right.
And you also need time. You have to pay for the archival materials. A photograph could cost $400. There are photographs, of course, that are in the film that were totally free. They were in the public domain. But in the sharing society we have now, people aren't aware that people have copyrighted materials have to pay for it, including to have the film A Raisin in the Sun in the documentary, which is one of the most expensive things we have in there. Reading. We did a lot of reading. I read a lot of secondary source material. I read a lot of primary material. Of course, Lorraine's papers. It takes time, and you need a team. You can't do a film like this by yourself. And so that's why you need all this, the money.
And for people that this is a film. It's not, because again, I think a lot of times also people just think, you just got a camera, you get a few interviews, and sort of like you do for look, I have a television show. It's a different deal when you're talking about, I've talked to other people, they're talking about documentaries that are $750,000, $1 million, $2 million. There are big screen films that have been done for that amount of money.
Yeah. So again, archival documentaries are expensive, and the time it takes to create them. But the other thing that is important for people to know is, I just lost my train of thought. Ask me that again.
The cost of it is that I've talked to Stanley Nelson, I've talked to others, and they say, look, really good documentaries, even you might see on Showtime or HBO, will go either from $750,000 to $2 million.
Right. Yes. So one of the things that's really important when you're doing a documentary that's based on history is you have to know the history before you do the interviews. So many people that we interview in these kinds of films, and Stan would say the same thing. They don't quite remember things. Just try to think about where you were on a particular day 10 years ago, or even more in the case of me asking these questions about Lorraine Hansberry. And so while I don't know everything that everyone's going to say in advance, I do have to know, I needed to have done enough work to know when they've said something wrong. And I said, well, no, actually, you said that, and that happened to you in 19 such and such. And I often bring newspaper articles or other things to help them remember and take them back into time. And it was really interesting when I interviewed Clarence Jones. The timing was really good. He had just come from a 50th anniversary down for the march. Right. So he was already back in time. His head was already there. I feel so confident that I got a better interview out of him because of that than if I had done it, another before that. Because he was very emotional.
Well, Clarence is a great guy. I know him well, and so he's also a great storyteller. Last question. What do you want? What do you want for an adult to get out of watching this? And what do you want a teenager or a child to get out of this?
I want adults, particularly adults who consider themselves middle-class people, to see some representation of themselves on the screen. I think that so many documentaries are focused on the challenges of being well, our stories are always about the challenges, but here's a story about someone who's not necessarily economically challenged, or it's not a story about dealing with addiction, and those are very important stories to tell. That's not what I'm saying, but the range of the African American experience is not often presented in the various documentaries that get produced, and so I want adults to see a story that resonates with them on many different levels. It's why I included, those home movie, that archival. So that was somebody's home movie that somehow ended up in an archive, except for the archival pieces that we got from the Lorraine Hansberry Properties Trust. And people have told me it was so wonderful to see women that look like their mothers and their aunts and their grandmothers, on the screen. And so I wanted that identification to be there. And of course, I want everyone to feel empowered and inspired. But I do have the greatest hopes for younger people. I want them to see somebody smart and educated and say, I think that being smart and well-educated is part of my heritage. And that I want to read a lot of books and know stuff like Lorraine. So if I have to tangle with Mike Wallace or Otto Preminger or David Susskind, I'm ready. I want them to feel inspired about artistic creation and know the journey's not always easy, but in the end, there can be great rewards. And I'm not talking about her winning, the New York Drama Critics Circle Award, and that's of course a wonderful thing. But the reward of having a community see themselves. When Lloyd Richardson, the woman said, word got around in my community that there was something going on down here for me, that there was something that concerned me. I want them to know that bringing stories to the public about our lives can be quite empowering, and I'm finding that out firsthand. Young people are struggling with issues of identity, no matter what kinds of identities you're struggling with. Lorraine Hansberry had to wrestle with that herself, and you're not alone. And then lastly, young people who want to be activists and feel like their calling is to go out and change the world in a more sort of overt way, delving into politics or joining organizations that are fighting for social change and fighting against racism and discrimination. Lorraine Hansberry is a great role model. She has lots of great quotes, and just her life, that now that more people will know about it, is I think, a great example.
All right, Tracy Heather Strain. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. All right, good luck with it.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Well, I certainly hope you enjoyed that conversation with Tracy, of course. And again, the Lorraine Hansberry film, let me give you the name again, of course. It is called American Masters, Lorraine Hansberry, Sighted Eyes, Feeling Heart. It premieres nationwide on PBS on Friday, January 19th at 9 p.m. Eastern. Please check your local listings for that, please. And so I want you to take a look at it. Folks, be sure to follow me on Snapchat, Instagram, as well as Twitter at Roland S. Martin. You can go to my Facebook page as well. Please like and follow me there. Always go to my digital website, allthat.tv, for more great content. And of course, you can visit rolandsmartin.com to learn out more information about me. If y'all want to bring me in as a speaker, you can just click speaking. You can go there. You can also, of course, buy my books as well as the books of my wife, Reverend Dr. Jackie Hood Martin. Okay, y'all, I've got to go. I got to hop on a plane. I'm headed to the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. We'll be live streaming my MLK speech tomorrow for a special Roland Martin Unfiltered on the road. Okay, y'all be sure to have an absolutely great day.
Serious drama that has at least the objective of making a larger statement about life, I think sooner or later has to become involved in its time.
Lorraine Hansberry is hugely important for having written A Raisin in the Sun, the most celebrated play by an African-American author, considered one of the great plays of the 20th century.
I'm looking in the mirror this morning and I'm thinking I'm 35 years old. I'm married 11 years and I got a boy who's got to sleep in the living room because I got nothing, hey? Nothing to give him but stories.
She was reaching into the essence of who we were, who we are, where we came from.
It isn't as if we got up today and said, what can we do to irritate America?
Lorraine was a very political person. Her plays, that to me is her jumping off place.
She's fighting the oppression of women. She's fighting against race discrimination, poverty, class.
Lorraine wasn't just a conventional mainstream liberal. Lorraine was a left-wing radical.
It really doesn't matter whether you're talking about the oppressed or the oppressor. An oppressive society will dehumanize and degenerate everyone involved.
Among all the women I knew, she was the most exciting.
As a middle-class Black woman, Hansberry was supposed to live a conventional life. And certainly in her early years in New York, she was not living a conventional life.
She's living this kind of parallel life and writing about it.
Lorraine became like part of my consciousness. She seemed to know something about everything. She was a profound thinker.
Lorraine was this new moment on the horizon. She set a whole new paradigm, a whole new stage for what we could now begin to expect of America and what we could begin to expect of ourselves.